Hello, I'm Scott Becker, Executive Director and CEO of the Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. It's my great pleasure to welcome all of you in the room and all of you on Zoom. We've got a great night planned. What a night it is. 70 years that this museum has been rolling along. It was 70 years ago that the first 3 streetcars came down some rusty rails into Washington County from Ingram Car House. So we're going to relive some of those memories tonight. We actually have some people that were on that trip that are going to share their memories. And we have a wonderful show that Bruce Wells has put together looking back over 70 years. It's just amazing to think how visionary our forebears were to preserve these streetcars and then form a museum. And I know many of them would be amazed today to see how this museum has progressed with this beautiful building here, the large collection we have, 3 campuses. We're even running the trolleys off the sun. So it's a pretty amazing ride. And we're going to cover that tonight. We will have some time for those in the room to ask questions at the end, or if you're on Zoom, we'll have time to answer some questions on chat. So without further ado, I'm going to invite John McGrew up. John was very young at the time, but he was one of the people that rode the 3 cars down to the museum. So John, without any further ado, come on up.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Scott. I was very pleased to be invited to come here tonight by Scott Becker. So this is an honor to be here. 70 years of the museum. That's pretty remarkable. When I was a youngster, my father was very interested in streetcars, and he would take me out on trolley rides around the city. And he had this interest because his father used to do the same thing for him. He would take him around and show him the city and show him trolleys and explain them to him. And when I had those rides, I found that it was a great learning experience to learn about streetcars, to learn about the city, to learn about the people around us. It was just a great time. And I would encourage any of you who maybe haven't had that experience to come down to the Trolley Museum, bring your kids down, bring your grandkids down, and have the same kind of experience here and explain everything to them. It's something that I would have said can't be relived once the streetcars are gone, but they're not gone, they're here. So it's a great time. The picture, well, we have a collage to show you at some point with some of the parts of the trip down here. Here we are. There we were. This is auto advance on slides. One of the things that made all this possible was a group of people saw that streetcars were fading away in Pittsburgh, and even if the trolley lines weren't disappearing, some of the older style cars were disappearing. And this group of people thought, you know, we ought to preserve some of these, because once they're gone, that's it, they're gone. But if we can grab a few of these and find some way to keep them, it would be good for history. So my father became one of those that joined the group. He ended up being member number 10 here at the Trolley Museum. And they started with 3 streetcars. And through the kind permission of the Pittsburgh Railway Company, they got to store those streetcars in the railway company car barn for quite a while until arrangements were made to do something with them. In August of 1953, one of the longer interurban lines that ran between Pittsburgh and Washington, PA, a distance of a little over 25 miles, was discontinued. And the group of people who wanted to preserve these cars saw that as an opportunity. They managed to acquire a small section of trackage, of probably half a mile of trackage, and a little bit of land around it, with the idea that in the future we can do something with this. In February of 1954, February 7th, 70 years ago today, we had that first trip from Pittsburgh down here to this site at Arden, Pennsylvania, just north of Washington, PA. And those first 3 cars were run down here under their own power, because the power company, or the railway company, was kind enough to turn the power back on for this line for the day to allow those first 3 cars to come down. So the picture at the top left is myself and my dad riding trolleys. This was much later, of course, this was in the 1990s, but we're still riding trolleys back then. And the next picture over in the middle at the top is West Penn car 832. That was one of the 3 that was in the collection, and that car was magnificent. It was meant to be a high-speed interurban for long trips, very smooth, very quiet car, very thickly padded leather seats, very much unlike the normal city cars that we were used to riding in. And that was one of the first 3 to come down to the museum. And the next picture shows that trip on its way down. Those cars are at the Morganza crossing at Canonsburg on their way to the Trolley Museum. So the 832, the dark orange car, came down first, and that carried most of the people down who were coming for this trip. The second car, Pittsburgh low-floor car, which Pittsburghers usually just referred to as the old yellow cars, had a lot of building materials in it, and we'll talk about that in a moment. And the third car is that little 4-wheel car at the back, built in 1890, a real incarnation of the Toonerville trolley, and that followed down too. Now, the railway company was very adamant about the idea that they didn't want that little 4-wheel car, that ancient car, to run under its own power on the railway system, because if something happens, if it breaks down, they could hold up regular service, and they just didn't want to get into that. So they instructed us that it had to be coupled to the second car and towed down here. That made it for a few hundred feet that way. We came out of the car barn and in Ingram, came around the curve to go up the hill, and that second car, the low-floor car, just couldn't make it up the hill with all the full load of building materials inside and the car that it was towing behind it. So the solution was obvious. They put the pole up on the 4-wheel car, and although the railway company was concerned about us, about the car breaking down, here it was pushing the other car up the hill, and that worked. After that, they put the pole down again to comply with the regulations and ran out to the end of the normal city operations, which was the Drake Loop. At that point, that was the beginning of the Washington Interurban line. So the cars were uncoupled, the pole was put up, and the trolley ran down under its own power for the rest of the trip. When we got to the museum, the point of the building supplies in the car was there was no building here. The cars were going to have to sit outside, possibly for a long time, possibly for a few years until we have a way to store them. So they brought along materials to cover the windows and the siding on the cars to protect the cars from the weather and from vandals. And that worked for the most part, although there were still problems. Because it was quite some time until the first building was put up, vandalism did occur, and weather took its toll also. Vandals crawled under the cars and stole the copper wiring, and the cars were just stripped. The middle car, especially the low-floor car, and the West Penn 832 ended up being vandalized. So at the bottom left here, you can see, if I wasn't standing in front of it, you could see it. The 832 ended up in very sad condition. It sat outside for years, and that really took its toll. You can see in this picture, there's actually a strap around the car to keep it from just falling apart, literally, falling to pieces. Grants were obtained some years ago, and the car was rebuilt. I remember being here at the museum, having some visitors look at this carcass, this shell of a car, and asking, why is that here? What are you ever going to do with that? Now, as a museum person, that's not a question you like to hear, but it's a good question. And fortunately, there was a good answer. And the answer is, in the bottom right corner, you see the same car rebuilt. That's now in factory fresh condition. and not only looking factory fresh, but operating in factory fresh condition. And it's amazing to me when I think of museums, often you think of a kind of a stuffy situation where you walk around and look at displays. There are lots of wonderful displays here, but in addition, it's an operating museum. And these cars are back to original condition, and this is certainly just one of the cars that have been restored now. So it is an absolutely marvelous museum. If you haven't had a chance to look around, by all means do so. Those of you who are viewing from home, you need to set some time aside and get down here, plan to spend the day, because this museum has done wonders. And it makes me wonder also, when I looked at this 10 years ago, there had been some advancements at the time, and I thought, how can they ever top this? And now here we are 10 years later, and it's just incredible. I could not have envisioned this. So it makes me wonder what's going to happen 10 years from now. And I have to compliment the executive director, Scott Becker, and the wonderful volunteers here and all the work that was done and the grants that were applied. The progress has just been astounding. So thank you all to all the work you've done here at the museum.
Thank you very much, John. That was a great discussion. And, you know, John mentioned volunteers. And that's really a big story about what we're about. And the perseverance of the volunteers. John mentioned the fact that the museum was heavily vandalized in the 1950s. And it really had to start almost from scratch. And by the time it opened in 1963, a huge amount of work had been done. And since that time, I'm here all the time, and I'm just so impressed with the volunteers that I see working here, the amount of dedication they have, the technical expertise. Just, it's just amazing to me. So, and I think the community has recognized that, and that's why the community has stepped forward, because they see what you all do, and they see what we have here, and that's what we have. So, talking about volunteers, our next speaker is Art Ellis, Senior. And Art's been a volunteer here almost the entire time the museum has been in existence. And he was actually volunteering in the museum store well into his late 90s. So he's seen a lot here. So I'm going to go over and hand the mic to him, and he's going to talk a little bit about his memories of February 7th, 1954.
Okay, as I said, I was a little bit older than John here. I was in my early 30s, and just a little something over 100 now.
104.
A couple of things I remember about that journey from Ingram to the museum site. The first place, I think, if I remember correctly, 3756 and its tow had trouble getting out of Ingram over the greasy rail. And on the way in, we started down a hill, and we could hear from the hissing that 3756 wheels were not turning, but we're still going down the hill at a pretty good clip. And after a while, I believe the Ingram bond foreman, I think it was Jerry Kaminsky, was that his name? He was
Denny Kaminsky.
And he was on the car, and when we realized that things were a little out of hand, he applied the electric brake on M1, and actually it helped slow down 3756. We then stopped at the loop, Corliss Loop, and put sand in the boxes on 3756, although I don't believe we rented any more hills where we really needed it. The fact that we arrived at the museum site, and everybody had a chance to run cars back and forth for a while, and then we'd pull one out of service and start tacking the old advertising signs over the windows and park them on the siding. And eventually, all three cars were on the siding and protected. And came time to go home, and the railway sent a double-end car out to pick us all up. And it was rather interesting on the way home. It was at dusk, and eventually it was full darkness. But as we approached each stop, the cluster lights would come on. Apparently, it's just how that worked, I'm not sure, but it was something we noticed. And I think what part of it was the fact that quite a few of the bonds were already missing, and I don't believe that the contractor was doing the job. I think it was a freebie job doing. Somebody was picking up the copper. So.
Art, just give me an idea, having been here all these years, what's your thoughts now? Did you expect the museum to turn out the way it is today? Did you expect the way the museum has turned out today?
I can't believe it. I mean, when the museum started up, it was about 10 years actually, the things just sat here, nothing happened, and then finally we came back, we got ourselves a diesel generator to provide trolley power, and we got a couple of cars rolling for a while, and actually one person could run the museum. At that time we used the old railroad dining car as a store and so on, and one person come down and he'd open the store, and of course we only ran on Saturday, Sunday, and sometimes we were just open, but we weren't running. But on one occasion, for example, I was running the whole museum, and the way we would work it, people would come in and we'd get them into the store and they'd buy the postcards or whatever, and if it happened to be a day we were offering the rides, we would do so. But there was a day where, I think it was a Saturday that I was working there alone, and this gentleman showed up, and I showed him around, and as he was leaving, he gave me, I forget what the bill was, but it wasn't a one, I can assure you. And I says, well, for that, you got a ride. So I dug a car out, and we gave him a little ride. And it was a little ride in those days. It started at Richville and went down to the property line. And that was it. And so I gave the gentleman a ride, and he says, well, that was nice. Well, he says, I'm manager of the TV station. I forget now whether it was Steubenville or Weirton. But he says, I'll give you a free commercial. So that little free ride paid off pretty good.
That's great stuff. Thank you so much, Art. And thank you, John, also for coming out today. So we're going to do a little changeover. While you gentlemen are making your way off the stage, I'm going to bring the microphone over to Bruce Wells, who's going to have a fantastic show taking us down memory lane. Thank you, Art. I'm going to move this over for you.
Alrighty. Well, thanks for coming out tonight. Our program is going to take you down memory lane, like Scott said. We've already had some pretty good memory lane there with John and Art. My name is Bruce Wells. You knew that because you saw it on, the screen here. And I welcome you all tonight. And all of you out there on Zoom land. This is really a big first for Kristen's exciting program for outreach to the world with our Trolley Museum. The story of the museum starts really in 1940, 1941. Art would know the exact time. I'm not certain. It was the Pittsburgh chapter of the NRHS, which was a group of gentlemen that were interested in trolley cars primarily, or it seems that way. And they were looking for a clubhouse, a place to meet and have their programs and to do things. And it just so happened that the Girl Scouts, the local Girl Scouts, for some reason here in Pittsburgh, had a streetcar trailer, an unpowered or previously powered, the body of a trailer car, a low-floor trailer car that they had acquired, and I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but this is the Girl Scouts next to their trolley car in Sheridan near Langley High School on the hill above the tunnel, the Berry Street Tunnel of the Panhandle Division. And by whatever means, Bob Brown and the early founders of our group, Charlie Dengler, made a deal to get the car, and they converted it into a replica of a low-floor car with the headlight in place and the destination sign on there with their club's name, the National Railway Historical Society Special. They gave it a number 4423, which I think was the next highest number of low-floor car that would have been on the Pittsburgh system. And it was their clubhouse, and they posed for this picture in 1941 or 42. It says the Pittsburgh chapter of the National Railway Historical Society Incorporated are pictured above. And it gives all their names, and I've had this passed down to me from Lou Redmond or somebody. But some of the notable people that are here that were some of the early members. On the far left there is George Tucker. George was member number 4, and he was Art Ellis's good friend for many, many years. And on the right side here is Harry Bartley, the second from the right, and Bob Brown, who was those are member numbers 1 and 2. They were the two of the buyers of the original car M1. And then in the window up above is Charlie Dengler, who was a postman who he worked for the Postal Service. He delivered mail on the north side, and he took endless amounts of film to document the collection, or the fleet of the Pittsburgh Railways PCCs. And I've been through boxes, like the boxes that he had them in, and he had a picture of every PCC, allegedly, from number 100 all the way up through 1799. So anyway, the war intervened, World War II intervened, and I know that George Tucker and Bob Brown worked for Union Switch and Signal, and they traveled around the railroads all over the country to help keep the signaling systems running well. And they were away from Pittsburgh, and there was nobody to really look after the car. So they were forced to move the car to a lot somewhere in Churchill, the Churchill borough in the eastern suburbs. And ultimately, the wartime scrap drive took the trailer car. So the first preserved car, you might say, was given up for scrap, which I've learned was the story in Connecticut. They tried to take the car that was preserved there in 1941 and scrap it, and their early founders made a deal to keep the car in active service so that that didn't happen. So it's still there, and you can still ride it. So in 1946, they decided to organize as the Pittsburgh Electric Railway Club, and the pattern of their operation was to run fan trips for with $2 and $5 and $4 tickets, and take excursions all over Western Pennsylvania and offer the excursions to people all over the country. So the first fan trip, their first fan trip was on Pittsburgh PCC 1600, and that was on the 23rd of June in '46. And in, later then in the fall, they branched out and they had a trip on the West Penn. And I've got a picture of the ticket from that ride. So ultimately, they had money in the treasury, but I don't think they used organizations' funds. Instead, the three founders, the Harry Bartley, Bob Brown, and Ray Galbraith, Reynolds S. Galbraith, anteed up $50 a piece to buy M1. And what they thought they were buying was a four-wheel passenger streetcar. And for years, there was all kind of speculation about, oh, well, this is car number 639 because Pittsburgh Railways has no record on their roster of whatever happened to this car. So it must be this is the car. But it didn't look like any other single truck passenger car that was ever in service in Pittsburgh. Instead, it was kind of an odd thing. But their idea was to get a Tunerville trolley and a four-wheeler and fix it up and have it as their trolley to run on their trolley line that they hope to build somewhere in the area. This being the area and this being the place. So they ran additional fan trips and they raised additional funds. This is Harry Bartley on the right and Bob Brown on the left. And they ran trips before the classic interurban cars on the Washington and Charleroi lines were disposed of. And they raised funds. And in 1952, they took a collection of the members and they raised money, and they decided to save a car from the West Penn system in Connellsville, PA. And that car is the West Penn 832 that John was talking to you about. And this is a video, actually an 8mm movie made into video, of the car being pulled out of the car house at Connellsville. And it was an interesting situation. I know that Art has told me the story of how the shop, and George Tucker also told us the story of how the shop crew hid the car from the scrap dealer behind a wall and made it so that it could be preserved. And the company got in trouble with the scrap dealer because the scrap dealer found out it was there, and they took they were very upset. So the railways company said, well, we're going to have to charge you more than $400 for this car. So they charged $500, and fortunately the shop crew was friendly to the museum group, and they put all kinds of extra parts in the car that we found useful when we did the restoration work. So one of the things that we got was 8 panels of new old stock cherry wood doors for the folding doors, which came in very handy. So anyway, the car was moved with that GMC tractor to Charleroi Car House in Charleroi, Pennsylvania. It was unloaded at Charleroi using jacks and blocking and so on. And that all happened during 1953 with a large group of volunteers, including some of the more recent early members, Dick Boker and Bob Scanlon, making the trip down to Charleroi to get the car onto the trucks and get it off the trailer onto the trucks and get it all cleaned up so that they could have a fan trip bringing it to Pittsburgh so that it could join M1, which was at the Ingram Car House in the western suburbs of Pittsburgh. So the car was all fixed up there, and it was moved to Ingram Car House, and M1 came charging out of the building. You might have missed that, but there was a lot of smoke there. Yeah, came charging out of the building to greet the car when it pulled in. So you can see in this picture, which I'm sure came right after that video, that film, they pulled the pole down. And I guess the controller flashed over or something exciting happened when they came charging out of the building. They probably came charging out and then wrapped the brake up too fast, the regenerative brake, and caused it to flash over. But at any rate, I never heard the story that goes along with the smoke. But one of the things back here, when the car was at Charleroi Car House, we met, the group unknowingly met our future friend Tony DeCinci, who worked for the railways company from a very young age and went overseas to be in World War II. Fortunately, the war ended. He came back. He worked for Pittsburgh Railways all the way through until the Port Authority and until the mid-'80s, when he retired and he came out here to help us. And in a little while, Janine's going to be up here. His granddaughter is going to be up here to tell you all about the exciting fundraising opportunity we have that has to do with M1. So we'll watch the smoke again here. Yeah. I don't think there's a lot of loud noise in this particular video, but we made it so that the sound isn't coming through the system here because it was a little bit of a challenge earlier. So anyhow, the next big thing they had to do is figure out where to, they had several sites in mind of a place that they could have a track and have a place away from the beaten path to have the museum. And I've been told years ago that they considered some sites on the Charleroi line, particularly down along the right-of-way that went past Crookham, alongside Crookham Trestle on the PNWV, which is up there, and the trolley line was down here. But they ultimately settled on this stretch of track, the stretch of track we have today, which had been, until the late 20s, crossed by a branch line off of the Pennsylvania Railroad. This is the Union Switch and Signal picture from 1928, showing the scene at the museum in that year, and with the grade crossing of the trolley line. So anyway, they were going to invest in property, and they were going to make the big leap of faith. So they incorporated it as the Pittsburgh Electric Railway Club in 1953. And the Pittsburgh Electric Railway Club needed an emblem designed, and they had member number 10, Mac McGrew, who designed this logo, which was the logo for the museum for many years after that, into the era when we changed the name to Pennsylvania Trolley Museum. So anyway, the big day came in 1954, and we already talked about that, and the curbside car led the way down to Washington, PA, but it hadn't been in the lead the whole time. 3756 and M1 were ahead of it when the cars got to the entrance of the tunnel, where they turned off of Carson Street, but they switched the order of the cars, probably to put M1 in the back so they could uncouple it and they could continue with the curbside car to stop along the way and get photos. So these are some of the photos that were taken along the way. We found that Era Mesrobian, who obviously had a very good camera and a very good eye for photography, took these photos of the curbside car coming down to the museum. And he also got pictures of 3756 on the street in Cannonsburg. He's got this solo shot. We know that the other two cars caught up with the 832 at Morganza Road. And of course, the bottom left, that's the track on Grant Street in Houston, PA, where the trolley line ran basically on an unpaved, in the middle of an unpaved street. The picture on the right there, of course, is M1 crossing the trestle, which is right down, that intersects with the parking lot at Sarah's Candy. So if you're in Sarah's Candy's parking lot, you're also standing on the right-of-way for the Washington Interurban. And there was a great big trestle there. So anyway, the cars arrived at the museum. They were boarded up as was described. Pittsburgh Outdoor Advertising, I was told, provided the panels to go over the windows, and the whole idea was to protect the glass. I don't think they were thinking of protecting the wiring underneath, but a big section of missing wire was a big reason why the curved side car, the Cincinnati Curbsider, did not run when they went to fire the cars up in 1963. So there was a lot of help along the way. There was a guy named Chuck Gout, and I think this has to do with him. They got a motor car from the Pennsylvania Railroad, and they got ties delivered. The railroad station in the picture on the left is the Arden Station, which was, if you go down the road from the museum, you cross the railroad tracks. It was right there on the lower side below the railroad, and Arden Station Road is there today. The trolley line right away went behind the station, and the original track that the museum bought really included the right-of-way for the track that was on the other side of the highway over there. But the museum was never able to use it because the trestle over Chartiers Creek was torn down, had to be removed, I guess, according to the Corps of Engineers, as a hazard to flood control and navigation or whatever. So anyway, somehow this had to do with getting railroad ties from a gondola car down at the station and bring them to the museum to build track. So in 1955, the museum had the museum had acquired work car M132, which was a retired passenger car 3047, which was a wrecked car at Charleroi Car House. And so somehow they discovered on the ticket there is actual picture of 3047 in Ben Avenue or somewhere over in Emsworth along Church Avenue. And they had a fan trip on M132, and it attracted a new member from Lawrenceville named Bill Franchek. And after that, he was a very avid rider of the fan trips. You can pick him out in this picture, standing right there in the doorway. You can see, I can't get my cursor to work here, so I guess it doesn't work with this thing. But at any rate, Bob Brown is there. Sitting on the step is Harry Bartley. Dick Boker's there. Bob Scanlon's there. And just a lot of the early hard-working founders of the organization. So that was the last low-floor car, the fan trip for the last low-floor car. So a caboose was acquired so that they could hire a watchman, so that we could have a live-in watchman on the property, because I guess there must have been some vandalism by that time. And they got the four-wheel Pennsy caboose for the watchman to live in, and unfortunately he took ill and was never able to be employed. So they had the caboose, but no watchman. And Lou Redmond was a big, that's another name that I'm going to mention later, I'm sure. But Lou was another prime mover of all of this. He probably took the picture of the fan trip of the 5432. So anyway, the wire was stolen. The overhead wire was stolen members discovered that, I guess they were on the fan trip. You see, the fan trip was on the 9th of September, and I guess they went down to the museum to check the place out and discovered that the wire had been cut down. So it was even more imperative to have some kind of security, but I don't think they ever did. They just never put the wire back up until John Wilkins came along and organized that effort. So anyway, this is a picture that shows some of the early volunteers a week or two after the wire was stolen. These are regulars who came down and helped get the track built into the car barn and helped do the construction of the actual construction of the founder's car house. And I know Bill knows these names. Chuck England on the right there was president of the organization when the cars were brought down here. John Baxter was a Pittsburgh Railways instructor and later manager, and he was very instrumental in shepherding fan trips through the city. Bob Scanlon was a young guy from out in Forest Hills, and Dick Boker was a good high school friend of his. And so, and Kurt Freund, the day I rode my bicycle here in 1965 from the South Hills along 79, which was built but not open, Kurt Freund asked me for a ride home that day. He really didn't have a car of his own, and neither did I. But I got to meet Kurt Freund early on, and I started going to regular meetings, and I got to meet all the people. So anyway, here's some more names from the past. Lou Redmond was a huge spark plug in organizing construction crews and getting things going out here. Walter Staffa, who was from Carnegie, was the young man who prepared and fabricated a lot of the coverings that were put on the cars when they got here. He was 15 years old in 1953, and he would take the streetcar to Ingram on Saturdays and work. He wrote an article for an issue of Trolley Fair that we put out back in 2014. But anyway, they started digging along the tracks in front of the car barn and sort of made a grade for the track to go into the building. Another thing they did to raise money was fan trips. They ran a fan trip on the B&O with some of the last of the steam. So anyway, there's the track being laid out going into the car barn. And I remember the grove of pine trees that was down there by the restrooms. This is what they looked like, and those trees were very small in 1956 or so when they were laying out the track. They got the track put together and laid out. One of the things I know they did was they cut the rail with a hacksaw by hand. You know, I've got that picture somewhere, and that was Lou Redmond. You know, he just kept cracking the whip and pushing the crowd along. And they erected the poles. We did some of this. We did some of this ourselves when we put new poles along the track going out to Main Street from Richville, the main passenger platform down there. And but they erected the poles for the building and got those all set up in place, and then hired a carpenter. Now Bill knows this for sure. They hired a carpenter to do the framing, to get it straight. So thank goodness they did that, because this was not a building with a great, well, it had a great set of plans, but it didn't have a lot of experienced carpentry people. So anyway, the members built the car barn from chicken house plans adapted by Harry Bartley. The original building that they were talking about buying was only for 4 cars. They weren't planning on having more than 4 cars. They had 3 cars already, and there was a lot of controversy about getting the 4th car. Yeah, and but they ultimately decided through unanimous consent or something, to make the car barn bigger. So they expanded the plan and they moved on. But there was a lot of opposition to getting a lot of cars. Oh, you can hear that. I did this with Art Ellis's movie projector. I bought one of those boxes and took my video camera and pointed it in one end and pointed the projection into the other end. This is 5326 coming down the turnpike, and there's the photographer for the McKeesport Daily News. He's queuing the guy up. I have that still photo somewhere because they did acquire it from the newspaper. But the first streetcar to travel the turnpike, very first, through the tunnels, down the turnpike, lower than 13.6, so bada da bing. So anyway, here's another still picture of it coming down the turnpike. That station wagon, I think, is Louis Redmond. I think there was a movie, there's movies that go along with this too, where Louis is waving the guy past because he didn't want the guy to pull over and go, "Oh, what's wrong, what's wrong?" So anyway, they got the car to the museum and they blocked it up on rails. I can remember doing this with the Philly sweeper. You might have noticed that picture in the little circuit that I put on behind the speakers before they started. Anyway, they got it up on blocking and they rolled the trucks under it and they lowered it back down onto the trucks. But before they did that, they got Norman Morris, who was one of our volunteers from Weirton, West Virginia. And he crawled under the car and reached up under the car while it was on this cribbing to connect the motors. But then later they found out that there was a junction box under the floor traps where you could just plug them in. Norman Morris was later blinded in a terrible auto accident, and I can remember him coming out here with his children during the 60s and regaling us with stories of building the museum. So anyway, they got the car barn was the number one priority, and they got the Philly car rolled into the building, and they stood on the roof of it, and they said, "You know what we need? We need a 26-ton locomotive." And of course, the West Penn Railways had this switching locomotive in Connellsville until 1958, and they talked a local trucker into putting it on his truck and bringing it over. And the funny story that goes on, maybe not funny at the time for the trucker, but it bent his trailer. But they got it unloaded into track 12, or we called it track 2 at the time. And in this picture, I can see that the Philly car is still there. So that was the 5th thing to arrive, as far as I can tell. So car number 6 was the next thing on the line, and that was, I guess they somehow talked Johnstown into selling them 350 about a year before the cars were taken out of service. They really didn't have any scheduled service, I don't think, with double-end cars, with the old cars. They kept them run mainly for fan trips. But so on July 19th, they had a fan trip on 350 and ran it all over the system. And there's Art Ellis standing there in the front window. So I knew it was one of the PERAC's fan trips. And so then 350 was ready to move to Arden, and John Wilkins, who is here tonight, he was there when they picked up the rails on the Bennetts Creek line and made a ramp out of them and loaded 350 onto the trailer. And this is what that looks like. These are movies that I got from Lou Redmond's family after he passed away. And I was able to convert some of them to video. I have a better machine now, I just haven't used it yet. But hopefully I'll get some better, video from this footage. It's all sitting at home waiting for me to take time to do it. So they loaded it up and they drove off over the mountains through Ligonier and brought it here to the museum. There they go. Route 403 or whatever the road is that goes down to Ben's Creek from Ferndale. So anyway, yeah, we don't want to lose that. They brought it to the museum, and they had room in their 9-car building, and the sides were starting to go together on the building, and things were looking good. And you can see that the Philadelphia car is behind West Penn 1. So, that gives you the order of operations going on here. So anyway, 350 was put on to track 1, track 11. And I guess they pushed some rails together so they could get it in there. What do you say, John? Yeah, John says, yeah, that's what they did. I wasn't there. So the fabled truck comes up often when when our young people find out that it's buried in the landfill behind the building. But it was a Dodge pickup truck with rail wheels on it, and nobody seems to really know what happened to it except it wouldn't start. It was infernal combustion. It wasn't electric, so it was doomed to failure. And so anyway, but that's the fabled Dodge pickup truck. And so as you can see, the barn, getting the barn closed in, this is probably the winter, 59 to 60. The building got closed in. They got some more ties from the railroad and stockpiled them, and they reestablished the switch that had been taken out when the coal mine branch was taken out. And they did that by paperwork, forgiveness and permission. We had members that worked for the Pennsylvania Railroad, and they just got the switch reactivated. And that's how that happened. And they got the switch reactivated and were able to tie the track into where the caboose was parked, and life went on. So anyway, Pittsburgh Railway stored. I've said this for several years now. Somebody at Pittsburgh Railways loved us, and I think it was C.D. Palmer. I really think he liked the museum. The Ingram Car House, we were allowed to keep the cars there until 1954. We want to arrange to take them to the museum on their own power. Oh, okay, no problem. You can do that. Lou Redmond wanted to run 4398 and 3047 on fan trips for the NMRA convention in 1958. He went in to he went in personally to talk to Mr. Palmer. Mr. Palmer called Mr. Buzzard, his chief of operations in the office. He says, "You see this man? His name is that's Mr. Lou Redmond." He says he wants to run some of these old streetcars that the museum owns for some trips. Just do whatever he asks you to do, to the best of your ability. So that's the kind of cooperation that the museum got, even though it always seems like the companies weren't that cooperative. Here, I think they were. They loaded 3047 finally in 1960 down at Tunnel Car House, brought it down Route 19, rolled it into the building, and then they went back and got 4398 and they rolled it into the building. And they even made a big production out of this. There they are. And we'll stop it with manpower. Yes, they're dusted off. Congratulations. Thank you, Mr. Wilkins. Thank you, Mr. Civic, Mr. Galbraith. Thank you. And then they closed the doors on another chapter in Trolley Museum history. There they go. So anyway, the march of the trolleys keeps, we got to get up to 9. You got to fill that car barn up. So the next thing that came along, somebody said, well, we really need a PCC, and Dick Boker wants to buy one. So, hey, They went out to Ingram Car Barn where there was all kind of cars stored. They talked Dick into this car. He wanted car 1111, but they talked him into 1138. And because it was more original and more complete, it was more original 1937. So anyway, these two color slides at the bottom here, color pictures, Kristen just found those at a train show and paid an exorbitant amount of money for them. Yeah, but and until then, all I had was these black and white pictures from Louis, and they have the dates on them like April 5th of 1961. So 4398 got here, and one of the things that it had in it that I remembered from when I was a kid was it had an ad card in it for Bill Burns. Yeah, you can see it. It's up there. It's one of those small cards, and it has Bill Burns, KQV radio. Listen to him on the radio, sponsored by Pittsburgh Railways. Well, one day I went into the car. It was gone. We don't know what happened to it, but if you ever see a copy of it on eBay, we'd like to have a picture of it. Well, we don't even care about the original, but I've always felt like maybe somebody picked that up to give to Bill Burns as a memento or something like that. But we don't know what happened to it. But it's something that's got, since I do a lot of work with ad cards, it's gotten my attention. And I watched KDK is 70 years old this year, or 60, I don't know. Yeah, they're 1949, so they're 75 this year. So I got that in my mind. So anyway, the next thing that happened was the museum road came bulldozing through. They wanted to build the industrial park here. You can see that they'd already graded around the poles along the railroad and leveled out the site back there, but they neglected to talk to the museum about putting in a crossing. And I don't think they talked to the railroad either. I'm really not sure exactly what happened, but my understanding was Art Schwartz, our buddy FDR, went over and stood in front of the bulldozer and refused to let them go by until they made it, because they were crossing our tracks. So somehow that worked, and then so in 1961, a big push was put on to build a crossing. And another thing that happened was the forbidden switch was installed. There was a group of young bucks seen in the picture here that really wanted to have a switch to go up the Arden Valley, but there was a group of members on the board that said, "Oh, no, 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 no," you know. So they cut the switch in and built it anyway. So that's, and the rest is history. So they pointed the operation down the right-of-way, which was, by the way, the driveway to get in and out of the museum. That's how 1138 was the last car to come in that way, along the right-of-way, up from Main Street. So anyway, the next thing was to build a substation, and there were a lot of people. John Baginski told me about getting on the bus and coming out on Friday nights after school when he was in high school and laying block. And they built a concrete block building for the substation. They found the trusses for the roof somewhere. They got everything they needed, and they closed it in. Oh, and the guy sitting there on the stoop, that's Tom Greer. You might not be able to read that on there. But Tom Greer was another one of our early members that were enthusiastic. Okay, so here's Art Ellis and his friend from West Virginia. Is that right? Larry Wexler, the guy on the left. No, the guy on the left is not Wexler. I don't think. That's the guy with the plaid shirt. I'm trying to remember his name. No, I'm talking about the guy behind Art. Yeah. Anyway, Wexler is in the picture with the control panel. Yes. Yeah, you are correct. Now, the guy on the right came around in later years He came back from Atlanta, and he volunteered as part of the regular group. So anyway, Bill Gorton, thank you. Who said that? Oh, there he is. Ralphie knew that. Yeah, that's Bill Gorton. Bill Gorton was a great guy around here during the 70s and 80s. So anyway, I don't have a copy of this picture. I got it from Louis when I did this annual report in 1969, and so I took it from one of those halftones. But there you've got starting at the left, you've got John Wilkins. Wave your hand. There he is, John Wilkins on the left. Tom Parkinson. Somebody here might recognize that name. He's the next guy over. And then there's Reynolds Galbraith, John Baginski, the guy with the dirty face and the glasses. That's Hannigan. Very good. And then Louis Redmond and his son, and Larry Wexland, I think. Yeah. So anyway, that was Malfunction Junction Day. 1138 was the first car to move, from what I understand. And then they ran 3047 back and forth. This was our first day of operation with home-generated power. If anybody says to you, well, you know, the first operating trolley museum in Pennsylvania is such and so, you can say, well, you know, when they came here in 1954, the fans that were, the people that were on the trip got to run the car back and forth, and that was the day of operations. So that's 1954. So anyway, Louis Redmond organized this public open house in 1962, and they used the Philadelphia car, and you know, we had mostly, it looks mostly like members in the pictures there, but that was a big chance to show off the museum and the operation after they got the generator going. And then, of course, there was a grand opening day, which was June the 23rd of '63, and they had grand opening day tickets, and if you had a certain color ticket, you got to ride on the first car, and so on and so forth. And we had our celebration of that here in 2013. 1963, right after that, operations began. You had the regulars there in the picture. This is on the cover of the operating manual. I put it there back in 2018 when we came out with the latest edition. And so you've got Ken Civic, and you've got I just blanked. Ben Venables, and then I'm pretty sure that's Hannigan, and is that Larry Wexland again? Maybe. Yeah, and then John Baginski. And then there's Tom Greer in the photo down below where they, you know, everything was outdoors. It was the great outdoors. There was no Bessemer Combine for the gift shop to be in. Everything was done on the ground outdoors. And on those early days, this is what the operation looked like. Chuck England, who was an engineer for the P&LE Railroad, lived in Beaver Falls. Chuck England was there in the picture on the top left. And then John and I think Pete Shakely and a bunch of visitors. Looks like we actually had visitors there. That was good. And then Ray Galbraith is in the photo on the left, and I don't know who all is in that picture down below. So anyway, and then the next thing, well, we've got the standard gauge siding. We need a steam locomotive. So boom, let's go get that. So they went down to Duquesne Slag Company and talked them out of their steam engine. And then, of course, the celebrity from New Orleans, that was a big deal. The Trolley Museum acquires the streetcar named Desire. And the story is that they asked for it in the 50s because it had the same number as our curbside car. I don't know. And it was in a picture taken on Bourbon Street of a car on the Desire line that was used in Life magazine. And so when the cars became available, we had first choice, and we got 832. So then we wanted to get out beyond 9 cars for sure, you know. So they said, well, we never got one of those big, long, beautiful West Penn interurban cars. So they went to the amusement park in Fairchance. And there were 2 cars there. One of them was the gift shop, the one on the left, and the other one was the storeroom, 722. And so they loaded 722 up. They got Johnny Bencart down there, as was done regularly. And they brought 722 back and put it on all kinds of sets of wheels and rolled it out and put it on cribbing along County Home Siding. So the next thing that came along was 3000, the one West Penn locomotive. And a group of guys found it down there. John Wilkins was working for a gas company down there, and he saw it in Reevesville, and he just had to have it. So he went out and hired a sandblasting equipment thing, and they cleaned it all up and painted it orange and shipped it to the museum in 1968, in March of 68. In 2004, it went for a big flyway around the railroad tracks, and it was brought down here and put in nice dry storage here at the TDB. So then, you know, well, we don't have a snow sweeper yet, and the Port Authority promised they'd sell us one for $50. And so somebody cornered John Dameron, the exciting manager of the Port Authority, and they sold us M37 for $50 in 1967, and it was loaded on the truck, and it was brought down here, and we swept snow with it, and we ripped the bristles off of it, and it derailed a lot. That's the 1969 picture. That's why that picture was taken. I was running it, you know, fell off the track. Used to do that all by itself. And that's why we parked it way out of the way. Anyway, so then, oh, hey, we don't have a 1400. So we got, and Wabco does. Oh, come on. I bumped the button here too soon. There we go. Yeah, we don't have a 1400, and Wabco's going to give us this one. So I was like, oh, yeah, let's get that one. So the same day Seashore loaded 1440 to go to Seashore, we loaded 1467. Then somebody said, well, you know, we got to get that steam locomotive to run. So believe it or not, and this might come as a total shock to some people, we fired it up and got it running. Bob Jordan, John Baginski, they were the prime movers on this thing. I just stood back and watched because I like electricity much better. And you can see how well it ran. The snifter valves were stuck open, and it made a lot of steam and blew it out, but it did move. And this is movies that I took. And are we pulling the caboose? I'm not sure whether we're pulling anything yet, but it was the Arden Short Line. It was the that's how we came up with the name, because the line was very short. Very short. And we renumbered the locomotive 12. It came here, it was locomotive number 69, which had that number for unsavory reasons. Anyway, 1969, the track was extended to Main Street, and this is a picture of 4398 heading down to Main Street over the track work that was supposed to be the, well, they salvaged the Ingram Y in 1962 or 61, the Y track that was used around Ingram Administration Building. And it was brought down here, but it really it wasn't curved. And the track was. So we installed it, but ultimately it didn't make it, you know. We thought better of that idea. Anyway, 1970, Thanksgiving weekend. We had Thanksgiving dinner. My mom made Thanksgiving dinner. She sent John and I out the door. Bye, we'll see you later. You're going to Philly to get a trolley. Yep. So we went down there and we tore up the tracks they had on the hill there, and Brownie got us a flat car, and the flat car had more holes in it than the Red Arrow flat car we have. And it was one-piece cast iron, and we loaded that baby up and brought it down here. Members Day, we used to have these rollicking Members Days where we had tug of war and the rope would break. We usually had Team Wells and Team Baginski. And the big thing about this picture, the main reason I put it in there, over by the Chartiers Creek on the other side of the field there, that's the old mill. There was actually a mill there for grinding grain that was torn down not long after this picture was taken. Long before they built the new bridge. So then, there was this thing, I tell people this all the time in the tour. The horse car at South Park, we knew about it for years. It was there from 1934, and it had been there since 1934. The museum group, our group had asked for it many times, and we really wanted it in the worst way. So the county one day looked at it and said, this car can't get any worse. We need to give it to the Trolley Museum. So they gave it to us, and it was, and our friends, the Millers from Meadowcroft Village, agreed to keep it at Meadowcroft Village for a time. So we took it out there and had it there till '77 when we began work on it. In '71, we also got the Armco diesel, and it went through several iterations and finally ended up back in its original paint job, thanks to Bob Jordan. And there it is. And we're going to be sending it off in the not too many distant years. A big thing that happened in '71, we acquired the worst rail in the world. I keep hearing that. It's the worst rail we have that's still in use. But we acquired a lot of it, and we busted our tails getting it. And there it is. And we loaded it one stick at a time into a gondola car and brought it here. And then unloaded it one stick at a time. So anyway, in 1972, we just can't resist getting equipment. So we got these 3 cars. We got 4 cars, actually. 4 acquisitions, 2 days. The Port Authority ran them up to the scrap track, and we loaded them on the ramp that we built up there. So the car, M56, is the Beaver Valley car. We worked on that for many years. There's a picture of Laura in 2014 standing there with it. There's a picture of it sweeping snow. There's a picture of it after Artie and I put the new roof on it. That was the first thing that was done to it. So anyway, this was very loud earlier, but this is the sweeper restored and operating. This is what it looks like. Sweeping lots of snow. And there it goes. Well, we really felt like we needed to have a dump car that would spread ballast since we were wide gauge and we couldn't bring a hopper car in like other museums. So there were 2 of these in Boston, and we had some seaside breakfasts with our friends at Seashore in 1973, and the deal was cut to bring the car for us to get this body, just the body. And so in 1974, 3618, the body of 3618 arrived here on a truck from Seashore. Another thing that arrived that summer was the Philadelphia snow sweeper car, C-125. We got 2 sweepers, but we left one of them in New Jersey and took parts off of it. In the winter of '75, we had this intrepid crew that went out to Rook Yard in Greentree and loaded up used ties because that's all we could afford. Now, because Scott's good at talking the way he does to people and telling them how deserving we are, we get ties from coppers. Well, anyway, Traction Models magazine had an article in it that said, here's these two fine interurban cars that are sitting out there in Coolville, Ohio, at the edge of the hill, and they're built into a building, And boy, wouldn't it be great if somebody could save one of these cars. It's a steel Jewett interurban car. Few others like it. So anyway, Bill Franchek says, yeah, we got to have that. So he really organized the heck out of it and got a trucker down there and a scrapper and whatever it took, and got it loaded up and got it brought to the museum. It arrived at the end of July. You can see Grandpa Ellis, he's manning the jack to jack the car up to get it up onto cribbing so we could put it on Philly sweeper trucks from the other car we scrapped. And it joined 3618 on the siding, and thus began the baggy tour that everybody remembers, riding along in the streetcar and saying, oh, under that bag is... Anyway, so of course that brings up the idea of, well, let's build another car barn. And well, let's build a shop, because we don't have a shop either. We're using this boxcar. And so this is the beginnings of building the shop. But there was a lot of trials and tribulations that went with that, particularly getting the National Guard Reserve from Uniontown to not get their machines stuck in the mud. That was quite an operation. So then a kind of a windfall came along in '75. It was the American Revolution bicentennial, and SEPTA wanted cars to operate down at Independence Hall. So we said, yeah, we'll get our car fixed up and we'll do that. Well, we took the money, but we didn't take the, we didn't take the hint. So anyway, somebody told me to put an intermission in this show so everybody could get up and stretch their legs. And there's still about 8 pieces of cake left. Yeah, Kristen said, this show could go on a while. We really need to let people stand up and walk around and wake up again. So give yourselves a break. And we'll see you all back here. Yeah, restroom break for sure. Yeah, let's all go to the lobby. Let's all go to the lobby. We're ready to go. Whoa. All right. We'll push play here. And we're off. Oh, look, it's 1976. This was probably some of the most exciting times we had. Thank you. Was working with the Port Authority. You know, I said, well, geez, the Pittsburgh Railways Company, they were very nice to us, and it was just something else. Well, I could remember times when we weren't on as quite as good of terms with the Port Authority. And it was Pete Flaherty, the mayor, that encouraged the Port Authority to actually make this happen. That they weren't real enthusiastic about having a bicentennial trolley downtown. But Philadelphia was going to have one, and so we could have one too. You know. So 3756 was fixed up, and Bob Brown spent some time spiffing it up some more, and we made a special deal to buy it. It and M1 were the only two cars in the collection that were owned privately. And so there was a lot of negotiations and discussions, and we basically acquired the ownership, the clear ownership to both of those cars at this time. And it ran around the streets downtown. They were really litigious with us about getting on it and riding it. And we just didn't have, they did let us ride in from the car house the first trip through the tunnel. But when they were testing it to get it ready for their service, they ran it all over the system. So I have a whole lot of pictures of it taken like at every wide spot in the tracks, you know. And but it was a memorable time having 3756 back in Pittsburgh. And it did net for us the acquisition of the parts that we were looking for, which was trucks for the Boston dump car, which M517 was that. And it also was one of our favorite things to run back and forth along the line after cookouts on Saturday night. And then Sunday mornings, we posed this picture, Scott Davis reading the newspaper, Ray Wyman, who is a friend, who was the guy that introduced Homer Wissner to the museum, sitting there, Ray Wendell's dad with no shirt on up there, John Baginski in the chair on the deck, and of course we stole the sign off the side of 3047. And we were starting to feel our oats, and the ARM convention was having trouble finding a home. And so at the last minute in 1976, we took on the duties of it and really pulled it together and did a terrific job, I think, of getting this going. And this group photo has some of the people I remember most from all the years I've spent being in the trolley museum business. They were all here for our conference. We had a conference with like 150 registrants or maybe more. And it was one of the biggest ones to date at that time. I had another picture to put on this slide, but Larry Lovejoy, John Tarr Sr., Dan Bauer, this is pouring the floor in the shop. This was, the 76 conference, and we finished up the shop building enough to get the floor poured, and then we went and fetched up the horse car from Meadowcroft Village and started evaluating the needs. I retired from teaching for about 6 months and put a lot of time in on this. And when I came out of retirement, I got a job at North Allegheny. So I had about 6 months off of teaching at this time. And we really were able to push the horse car along pretty well with a lot of help from a lot of good people on our end. This photo is this is the National Guard group from Uniontown that I was talking down a little while ago. They really came out for us on this day and helped us unload building materials that we needed for the expansion of the track up the valley, which was followed by this particular situation where we were putting in the crossing on Main Street. And I was listening to Larry Lovejoy a little while ago talking to John Wilkins, and we actually cut through we cut the macadam filler out where they'd filled in where the tracks had been on the original concrete road, and put the crossing right back where it had been. And there's a nice sharp bend there at the other end, but that was on account of the creek was not exactly where it was previously when the track alignment went through there, and the curb would have been sweeping a little more. And unfortunately, we didn't get a guardrail in soon enough on that side there where you see the New Orleans car. The picture of the New Orleans car on the top, that's a test run in April, or not April, but in May or June. But during the fair, the car jumped the tracks at 7 p.m. And we stayed up until 4 in the morning putting it back on tracks by building cribbings and jacking it up in the air, sliding the body sideways, re-railing the truck underneath the car, and then putting the car back on the truck. And we did that all in a night time, all in one night's work, Anyway, the Philadelphia car got worked on and was dedicated and never left Arden. We never sent it back to Philly. They never asked for it. Everything went just so, and we were able to keep it there. So in 1982, we began our big push with SEPTA. We really wanted to save Red Arrow cars. That was something that I had in my in my list, my punch list, and but this in February in January they put out a bid for some work cars from the Elevated, and we decided we wanted this retired milk car as an example, something good for the collection. And then we started on the press to get cars from the Red Arrow fleet when they were retired in 1982, and so we put together this. We put together a flyer that you see there in the picture, and I put the flyer together, and Louis Redmond got the printing done. And then we set about with Joe Brantner and his magical daisy wheel printer on his TRS-80 computer. We made up letters and sent one to every member of the legislature and every county commissioner in the area. And we mounted an effort to get them to allow us to save the cars at a nominal cost, because we were Pennsylvania museums trying to preserve history. And so this is how we met Barry Stout. Barry Stout assigned one of his, well, first of all, I went to Northway Mall and talked to Ed Early in person, a senator from the North Hills, and he in turn introduced us to Barry Stout, and Barry put us on to Chuck Krause, who was his #1 legislative assistant. And they mounted a pressure campaign with our letters, our letter writing campaign and all, to get streetcars sold to us for $1. And we were fortunate enough to get car 78 and car 5 in that purchase. And then after that, the SEPTA quickly put everything else up for full price to the high bidder. And we were lucky to get car 14 along with 5 other St. Louis cars. Because we wanted to get one, so we bid on a bunch of them, and we got 6 of them, you know. So there was a monumental task to disperse of those cars, but that ultimately happened, and we ended up with 24 because R.H. Brown, Bob Brown, wanted to make sure we had a second car. So car 24 was personally financed by him. Anyway, then another one of our longtime dreams was to have an open car. So we bought this body from the Rock Hill Museum in 1983, and it was a project where Rod Fishburne, who was a visiting member from California, was able to use his truck driving experience to help us get it moved from Rock Hill back to Arden, and we sort of put it on the back burner for a number of years until we got the car from Orlando, which was actually a wonderful thing, and we sold this body to our Northern Ohio Railway Museum. I keep pushing that button too much. There we go. One of the things with the Red Arrow cars, the last 2 Red Arrow Louis cars were still unmoved and unaccounted for, or I hadn't found anybody to buy them. And Jim McHugh, who was on the SEPTA board and who had an interest in the New Hope and Ivy Land Railroad, and who had already gotten a car for New Hope, car 20, he wanted a second car. And we had 2 cars left. He said, I'd like to get one of those cars that you have left. I said, well, I'll tell you what, if you take car 22, which is the better of the 2 that are left, and move 19 to New Hope so we can get the parts off of it, we'll give it to you. And you know, we'd only spent like $250 in either of these cars. So that worked. That happened. That happened like at the 11th hour, and we had car 19. We went down in the summer of 1983, and we salvaged the parts off of 19. And later on in 83, Dave Buechler went and salvaged parts off of it for car 450 at Ohio Railway Museum. That's why the big holes are cut in the end. And ultimately, the body was in New Hope, and Rod made arrangements to have the body taken by a scrap dealer. Well, we got down to New Hope to get the trucks, and the scrap dealer had stiffed us, and we ended up having to take the body to the junkyard ourselves. So that's what this picture depicts. There's Cindy's truck and our streetcar body on the trailer we rented to move the trucks with. We tore some phone lines down in New Hope. We just had quite an experience with all of this. The policeman looked at the car and we measured it. He says, "That's legal height. Those idiots from the phone company. I'm always telling them to put their wires up higher." So we made out very well, and we got to the junkyard, and the guy looked at us and he says, "Are you guys with SEPTA?" And he looks at us, and I said, "No, I'm a teacher." He's an engineer for Conrail, and he's an engineer for Los Angeles Power and Water. "Yeah, I didn't think you worked for SEPTA. You don't look like you work for SEPTA." "Okay, well, can we give you this car body?" "Yeah, sure." So we took it back in the yard. This guy who was working the big magnet disconnected the magnet, set it on the ground, strapped the car up, and picked it up and swung it around and played out the cable and set it on the ground, and we were like, and we got on the road and went back up to New Hope, and we checked in late for dinner at Bob Brown's house. So anyway, then, you know, we were on a roll. So we had Rod was now a guy that was driving the truck and everything. So the Port Authority was getting rid of things at South Hills Junction, and so M551 was something we wanted, and the body of sweeper C132 was something that they had that we wanted for parts. So we got those two cars and moved them out. And this is a picture of 551 after they had considerable work done on it at the museum. Then you know, we had this plan in the back of our heads to regauge the Unity / New York, Ontario, and Western caboose. And Steve Cherpak, who was a local jack of all trades kind of a guy, bulldozer operator and everything else, he said, "Oh, I can take parts off those Philly sweepers and make this caboose broad gauge," and he did. So we got this caboose on wide gauge track, and then we started using it for Santa Claus after that. Yeah. And then we said, geez, you know, we need trucks for that open car. And we asked Ohio Railway Museum about acquiring 067, this Columbus flat car. And they sold it to us. And we went on, and Rod loaded it up and brought it back. And we had ourselves a pair of trucks. Unfortunately, there was sentimental attachment to the car and the trucks that were under it. So we went out and found some other trucks, and there's a whole lot of story involved there. But Dave Buechler was a longtime Ohio Railway Museum volunteer, and he wanted to see the car kept together. In February of '86, this was a long time dream of ours. We knew that the Dewdrop Inn / Ranch Bar along Route 65 up near north of Elwood and south of Newcastle was the Harmony car, and we wanted the body. And Bill Franchek wheeled and dealed, and we talked the Allegheny Foundation into money, and by golly, a deal was made to build a new building in its place and get the body out of there. So in February of '86, Rod went up there and loaded up the Harmony car, which turned out to be car 115.
That building is such burned down about 5 or 6 years ago.
I thought you were going to say it's burned down 5 or 6 times. When we went by there, it looked like it was open, but I'd heard that it had been on fire. Yeah, okay. So anyway, then the steam locomotive, you know, the steam locomotive had a lot of tender loving to death, and was really in tough shape. And somebody found a buyer for it in Boca Raton, Florida. I think it was an executive that had been with PNLE Railroad. So that went away, and then we had our next ARM convention, and that was more of a planned event. We again had a huge turnout. We put on we had good programs and good events for people to do, and had a great time. After that, 14 got a little bit of touch-up paint put on it. It looked so bad, we decided to paint the whole thing. And then we decided to put a new canvas roof on it, and put new wood on the roof, and fix it all up, and put new rubber on the roof. And pretty soon we had a pretty decently presentable car. And then a coup de grace of coup de graces. Louis Redmond's like, we need to talk to the Port Authority about having another thing with 3076 going back. I said, good luck with that. They weren't thrilled the last time. Well, one of the problems with 1976 was there were a lot of old timers around that still knew about the old cars. And they knew more about them than we did. So we had a tough time with them. But by 1987, all those people were retired. So it was much easier this time. And Louis Redmond's idea was to go directly to Jim Roddy, the chairman of the Port Authority board, and just plunk it down to him in front on his desk. And so he and I went to Jim Roddy's office down in the Oxford Center or wherever it was, and met with him in person. And he says, yeah, that sounds like a good idea. We'll have a big shindig. And so we put the idea together, and they followed through, and 3076 was a big hit. And there's like, I could just put on a whole talk about doing that because it was crazy, crazy. We were lucky to have Tony DeCinci with us, I can say that for sure, because he was able to troubleshoot when we got into trouble when we were testing the car, because it did have, we turned the corner and started up the hill into the tunnel, and on the test run the first night, and there was this loud boom. It was like the noise that this sound system made when we turned it on today. And so it was a good thing. So anyway, 1987, we got the shaker car. This is another, we wanted it in the worst way. So after 5 years, they said, yeah, let's get rid of those cars. We got the Red Arrow snow sweeper and the flat car in 1988, along with the crane car from the Port Authority, which came as part of a deal where we traded them the trucks from 4398 that we weren't using to go underneath the line car. So the line car, as it stands right now, has the trucks that 4398 had under it. Anyway, 1989, we had a chance to get a different West Penn 700 car, and we took the opportunity and got 739 from near Oakford Park. In 1989, we swept snow again. The snow sweeper, we put a good tar paper roof on it and went to town. 1990, we acquired 73. We acquired 1711. 1711 was totally paid for by the generosity of George Tucker, who had the body work done at Bar Cannon Body Company, and we had a great operable car. And in 1990, we met Scott Becker. He came out to give us a little bit of his inspiration and his expertise. He was very young then. You can see how dark his beard is. And so we showed him all around, and he convinced us that changing the name was a good idea. So then, after that, we had a chance to get a bullet car, and we got a bullet car from the P&W, even though it's standard gauge. And then we decided, well, we've got the shop building opened up. Let's move the curbside car down there and really open up the old car barn for use for operations. That's that. Oh, and then we hired Scott Becker. See? And if you look at this picture, you'll say, that looks familiar. That's this picture zoomed in on. There's a little photoshopping there. Okay, so once we had Scott Becker, we had to have an office for him, so we added on to the visitor center, which was a good idea we had anyway. And this is the addition of the shop edition, which is currently still the offices, but everything's down here now. And then in 1994, we talked Mara Taylor into coming out and dedicating 78. And of course, all the restoration work we did on 78, this is the first mention of it, but we spent a lot of time working on it. In the spring of 95, we took the Port Authority up on their, they were getting rid of M210, and we told them they had to give it to us. So they gave it to us. And not long after that, the Arden Loop was constructed, and we had a loop at the end of the line for the first time ever. And 2723 was acquired, and to be like a SEPTA car. The History Center car was brought to the museum and turned around on our loop and taken back and put on Jim Lilly's truck so it would go into the History Center facing in. So that was our contribution to the History Center, among others. And then in 1997, really we weren't expecting it, but we ended up getting Freight Motor 07. We already had the milk car, and it was like, do we need another freight car? But nobody else wanted it, so we got it. And it's a good thing that we did because it looks great. And then the shop was added on to in 97. The The Founders Car House was renovated in 98. Work commenced on 14 in 97. See little Laura Wells there. She's standing. There's Tony DeCinci directing Kevin and Justin in getting started. We were just going to sand it down and paint it. You know how that went. Anyway, and then in 1998, the Market Frankfurt car started our relationship with AdTrans and Ray Bettler and all of those folks through Dave Hamley's efforts. We got the Market Frankfurt car. This is a picture of it being put in the TDB. In 1999, Paul Vassallo and his wife sold us Jersey Shore Nanny's Fort number 3, which is a fine addition to the collection. The mainline track was extended to the east side starting in 2000 with the ribbon cutting. We got a call from the Station Square people, and they're like, we want you to get all these junk trolleys out of here. Don't you want them? And yeah, sure. So we traded and got the Cincinnati, Newport, and Covington car for a New York City car that was at Station Square. And then, of course, we had a standard gauge siding, and it wasn't full enough, so we had to get the Porter locomotive. And it was a cool thing, the side rods. And so Dave Hamley arranged that, and he got it all cleaned up and fixed up. And then the AdTrans people wanted to do more favors for us, so they took 2711 from Philadelphia, took it to Elmira, and overhauled it as a wheelchair accessible car, and sent it back completely signed up and beautified. And we used it for birthday parties. 2001, the ground was broken for the East Side track extension. We have all the local dignitaries out there dignitarying with shovels. You get that? It's so quick. And then the Elmira was still bored, so, and they wanted to keep the guys busy, so they said, yeah, send us another PCC, we love them. So we sent them 1138, and they fixed it up. Our friends in Philadelphia, Jim Lilly and Gary Pfeiffer and those guys said, hey, SEPTA has this wide gauge locomotive thing that they're getting rid of, and they threw out the standard gauge set of, they built this so that it could be either gauge, and they could just switch it around. They threw out all the standard gauge stuff, so we think you ought to get it. So we got it, and it turned out to be a godsend for loading the cars to send up to the TDB. Anyway, then the AdTrans, send us another car. So we took 1711, which was already had $25,000 spent on it, sent it up there, and they spent God knows how much on it, and really rebuilt it from the floor up. And then 2002, the track opened up down to the east site, and the construction began on the display building with the digging down and filling in with good solid soil, all kinds of smart engineering work. In 2004, 14 was finished, and we got Merritt Taylor to come back, and he not only came back and ran the car through the ribbon, as you can see in the little inset picture, but he also did oral history with us in the hotel room at in Meadowlands. And we had car 14, which is by far the most thoroughly restored thing that we have, completely to the nines. Anyway, then the trolley display building was completed, and it was time to fill her up. So that set about some of the pictures we've already seen of things moving and loading things on Jim Lilly's trailer and with RG2 and so on, and getting them down there and getting them loaded up. And then 4398's project restarted in 2004, but then also the Ivan hurricane flooded the place. And you may not have ever seen these pictures, and maybe you have, but this is how much water we had backed up from the bridge at RCA. You know, quite a thing. And the picture on the right there at the bottom is one that Larry Lovejoy came in the back way and got in the evening of the storm. So anyway, empty space brings gifts. You know, we had that big building, we had to fill it. So we got 8042, which we're spending a lot of time working on now with the help of the Friends of Philadelphia Trolleys. And we got the Mon West Penn 274 from the Branford group. 250. Yeah. It just rolls off the tongue. I had years of saying just 274. You've got to understand. Anyway, creature of habit. So anyway, 250. The substation, the West Substation, 2005, thanks to the Herculean efforts of Denny Baucus. I mean, he's been amazing, an amazing addition to the cast of characters around here, getting things done. And the West Substation was certainly a huge engineering marvel, and still is, because it was built to take care of the needs of all of these buildings that we built in the meantime. 2006, you know, we spent time cleaning cars up to make them nicer at the TDB. 2006, we dedicated Redmond Y to the memory of Louis Redmond, who really was really the spark plug that made it happen. He had so much other help, but he was really the man. And the last time we saw him, I think, was at New Year's Eve, 2002. That's that picture on the right. Ralph's in that picture. Then the Rio Open Car came. We put together that deal. Scott put together that deal. It just was, it was just an amazing thing. And then getting the trucks regauged and all that. These are all pictures that have to do with the Rio Open Cars. There's pictures of them building them in Rio, pictures of them towing trailers in Rio, pictures of them on the deck of the banana boat. The ARM group that went together and got the cars, got them shipped here on a banana boat with Honduran registry, I guess. And then there's a picture at Oakford Park, right down the road from where we got 739. That's an open car from the West Penn, which the Rio Open Car is very much like. And then there's some pictures taken at Bloomsburg, which is where the car was originally restored. And in 2008, the track was connected to the TDB. 2009, we had a chance to, Dave Carpenter made it possible for us to get 4145 from the Trolleyville collection before it was dispersed. But then we also got the Toledo car, which I don't have a picture of in here, and 2227, which a tremendous amount of work was done on to get it rolling, along with the tremendous amount of work that went into getting the 4145 rolling, because both of those cars were on standard gauge trucks. There's a couple of prime mover guys from the open car project. There were a bunch of them. You know, I know Bernie did a lot of work on it, and John Hayback was involved, and you know, just everybody in the shop kicked into getting it going. But this is Jim Herron and
Bob Alexander.
Bob Alexander. Thanks. Sorry, Bob. I know you're watching. I was going to try not to forget any names. Anyway, then we couldn't forget Frankie the Cat. Yeah, and then Beaver Valley 1 was like a life's work for me, because Artie and I started working on it in 1972 when it got here. When we walked the pole around it the first time, the roof tore off. Or not the first time, but when John and I were in New Orleans on our way to Bill Franchek's wedding in Louisville, the gang got it out to take it for a ride, and that's when the roof ripped off. And of course, this is the fabulous snow sweeper picture that we looked at before. And you can hear the brooms hitting the platform. Oh, and then finally, you know, now I'm going to wrap this up with the Westman 832. You can't say too much about the Westman 832. It was a labor of love. It was the most incredible transformation that I can imagine. Because I can remember looking at it and saying, we're never going to figure out how to get this back together. And guys like Jack Sutherland spent endless hours poring over. This is the back of Jack Sutherland down here in the right-hand corner. Poring over the pieces of wood and figuring out what they were and where they came from. And Jim Herron, John Haybeck, and especially Jim Ott. Jim Ott and his ability with wiring. All people that we found through, volunteer outreach. Dave Buechler there in the middle, Walt Staffa, Bill Franchek, putting the roof on. Joe Warkany came up from Cincinnati and helped tack the canvas. It was an all-out effort. Anyway, these just came across the wires here. You know, Larry Lovejoy, he's home and he's got the project all done here. Not as much to do, not all done, but he must have a subscription through Ancestry or something to newspapers.com, and he found these articles that I think the one on the left maybe I'd seen before, but the other two are from the local Washington paper, and they are incredible accounts. There were 60 people on the trip, according to the people they interviewed from the museum. 60 people. Somebody asked that question. Oh, well, there's 20 or 30. You know, and here it says 60. I just read this earlier today for the first time. So anyway, that's it. 70 years ago, our museum project made the news, and it's still making the news. And we were just on TV, what, 3 or 4 times this week? Yeah. So it's a tribute to everybody that we just keep kicking butt and taking names here. And that's the end of that show. Woo-hoo. Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Bruce. That was wonderful. Well, I learned a lot. And it really gives you pause because of how blessed we are, how far we've come, and our forebears, how hard they worked to build this place, a lot of times just with their bare hands. So we're about to wrap this up, but we had a great group photo out in the Volunteer Boulevard tonight with 2 of the 3 first cars, West Penn 832 and Pittsburgh Railway's 3756. M1 was not in the picture. You might not have noticed that, but it wasn't there. But we would like to get it restored. It's the mother car, as some museums like to say, first car, 1949. And so it's my great pleasure to introduce Janine DeBoer, who's our Director of Annual Giving and Marketing. She's going to tell you about our efforts to get this car restored.
Thanks, Scott. Hi, everyone. Thank you for hanging on until the end of the day, and this has been a very exciting day. I don't know if you all were aware, but we had an event here earlier today. We had a Chamber of Commerce event, so it's been a great celebration of our 70th year. But one special thing that happened during that event was we received a gift, a very nice donation from Dollar Bank. Dollar Bank is a very old established bank here in southwestern Pennsylvania in 1855. Now, why is this significant? Well, we had a conversation, and Father Jack Demnian was telling us that when he interviewed Art Ellis a couple of years ago, Art said, well, you know, M1, the pay car, was operated right up to Dollar Bank, downtown Pittsburgh. The silver dollars were loaded up, and then the car went to all the car houses and paid the Pittsburgh Railway employees in silver dollars. My grandfather, Tony DeCensi, received his pay that way, and he used to give my mom, when she was a wee little girl, those silver dollars. So I have a story and a connection to M1. I know a lot of people here do as well. It's a very important car. It's our first car, as we noted. It is the oldest electric car in our collection, and I believe it is the only pay car left, one of the few pay cars left. Okay. This is a very, very important project for us. And Keith Bray, who has done some wonderful restoration work, has given us an estimate of $210,000 to restore it. The good news is that our good friend John Wilkins has graciously put up a dollar-for-dollar match to $100,000. So thank you to John for doing that and being so generous with us. I also want to let everyone know we have a second dollar-for-dollar match to $5,000. If we can raise that $5,000 in the next 3 months, GBU Life has another well-established financial institution here, has a program called GBU Cares, and one of our newest volunteers, Gary, who's back there, helped us. He's a retired employee of GBU Life, so we are going to do that as well, so we're really excited about it. We have a flyer. We have not given up on creating flyers and passing them out to you all. Please take this flyer with you. It gives you all the information you need about M1. Help us raise those funds. If you have any questions, you can contact me. My information is right over there, but you all know how to get a hold of me. And anybody online, please contact me at development@patrolley.org. You can donate online very easily, but we thank you in advance for your generosity. Thank you.
Thank you, Janine. That was great. Really appreciate it. So again, Bruce, thank you so much for your time today and your memories. Your memory's amazing, the photos you put up. Our film crew, I want to have you give a round of applause to our film crew. They've been working very hard today to put this together. And we pretty much are running out of time with their work, so I think we're going to end the evening at this point. But I just want to thank everybody for coming out. And I do want to remind you that this Saturday we're having a volunteer open house, both in the morning and afternoon. So if you know of anyone that you might be interested, you can certainly invite them to come down. There is some flyers over here about the open house. And we always need more volunteers to help the museum grow. So again, thank you so much for coming out. Safe travels home, and we'll see you soon. And thank you on Zoom as well.